I'd like to continue on the theme of signification by outlining the basics of universal signification, universal or general signification, or rulerships as it is known. And rulerships run by the principle of similarity, and it is the general idea that astrology uses, that the planets and signs and houses, they have a symbol, but this symbol can stretch out in multi-level, multivarious ways. They're kind of, how can I say, multivalent, because essentially they're to do with patterns. And patterns can take place at any particular level, at a physical level, the sociological level, the psychological level, and also as a kind of spiritual force or principle in life that is acting through you. And so, for example, let's take Jupiter. Jupiter is that principle of expansion, and so if we extended this idea out, it could be elasticity, or it could be a sense of wanting to travel or look further or look beyond the ego, beyond the known. If we attribute it to the ninth house, then we can see why the attribution of Jupiter loans itself to that house, because it has to do with long-distance travel and law, and those things that take our mind into a place where it can see how much it doesn't know. I mean, if the third house, for example, is our personal library, then that's a library onto the world. So the Jupiterian process in us, the general keyword is expansion, are all of those expansive forces which often relates to education, because I think educate means to bring out of oneself what is already there, to extend our consciousness into the unknown. Too much is made, I think, of the association of Jupiter to religions or meditational practices or things of that nature. It lends itself to that symbolism because it's fundamentally to do with reaching out into places beyond the known, and that may be inner space, that may be its connection to belief and faith and hope, and those things beyond ourselves which give a broader meaning to life. I would say Jupiter is also the planet of discovery, and so therefore has a lots of relationship to science. I mean, there are plenty of scientists, there are plenty of people that want to endeavour to explore other things, just as much as important as any other form of discovery. So exploration, adventure, discovery are a relationship to this planet. It doesn't want to be tied down. It's a kind of youthful planet relating to the teenage years, often related to the figure in Jungian psychology called the puer aeternus, the eternal youth. It's as if he wants to remain forever young, forever adventurous, hoping, being a swashbuckler or something like that, or always being a teenager, wanting to go to distant lands, do new things. He's the speculator. All of those kind of associations stem from what is called the natural signification of the sign of the planet. Where the house comes in is often that is an arena of life in which this sense of expansion can take place, and so the ninth house is slightly different from Jupiter, although it carries its force in a particular sphere of experience in life. That's why the ninth house relates to higher education, the same as Jupiter could, but Jupiter is much more broad than that, because it also, of course, is the ruler of Pisces. We often don't get that these days in many texts, as if Jupiter is always that fiery, intuitive planet which is taking you to a land, as I say, beyond the known, the discoverer, the person looking for new lands, the explorer. But in its Piscean aspect, the planet Jupiter can be extremely wanton or desirous for emotional experience. More is never enough. Bigger is never big enough. Once one has done one thing, one wants more. So Jupiter and water signs, and of course it's exalted in the sign of Cancer, could become this desire, or perhaps even a greed, because there's something about the personality with this placement strong, which seems to want more or do more. It's hungry for emotional experience. But the problem with Jupiter, of course, is it ever wants to seek beyond itself. And then you get the myths coming in, which can help here. I remember in one of my videos I mentioned that I had a Jupiter transit on the ascendant, and I thought I was going to win a major poker tournament called the Goliath, which is, of course, in line with the symbolism. And instead of winning, I had a big fall, a very big disappointment. And this is the other side of Jupiter. If you expanded it through myth, you could see it relates to Icarus. Icarus, who made certain things, made this idea that he could fly off of a castle and so on. His father warned him not to, Daedalus, warned him not to float too near the sun because it would melt wax, which kept the wings together. But obviously that flight, the exhilaration of going high and up into some kind of exalted state, took him away from the earth, and eventually he came crashing down. This is the other side of Jupiter. Now, when I'm doing this, when I'm going off into a particular planet and just swimming around in its associations, this is called amplification. Which is a Jupiterian process, interesting enough, because it enlarges the theme. It takes us a broad trip around everywhere to connect to here and to connect to this and connect to that. And this is where people find astrology a bit tricky, because with all that universal symbolism, all that's contained under one planetary god or house or sign, it all becomes rather confusing. Where do we start in an interpretation? And that's where context of association comes into it. Because if we see Jupiter as one of the planetary gods within us, the planets within, if you like, part of our own inner solar system, part of our own psyche, then we begin to focus in as a kind of need or an archetypal force which wants to move through us in a particular way. We meet the gods through the houses and through the rulers of the houses. We meet them and we try and give them some kind of value or expression in our lives. If one wants, we could say they are needs or desires or centers of force, centers of patterning and conditioning, which find their expression through the human psyche, in what we do, in what we say, in how we are, and sometimes they manifest physically, sometimes as difficulties in the body. Sometimes they manifest outwardly as jobs or activities in the world that we want to do. It's like a planet is a center of operations radiating out its particular pattern, and it's for us in our conditioning and in our standard of living, whether we're poor, whether we're rich, whether we've been educated or not, this planetary energy will need to find an expression in real life. But of course, what we what we do in real life is reflective of ourselves. What we're drawn towards and to do is reflective of what moves us from within. And so wherever we see a planetary placement, whether it's within us or expressing something outside of us or some activity in the world, really, there isn't that much of a division. And so we can begin to see that there's a kind of extroverted form of astrology which tells us what to do and perhaps where we're going and the types of things that can happen in our life. That's all the outer. They are also representative of inner drives. Our psychic makeup, if you like, what Jung called the predestinatory character. And it's, if we just frame astrology like that, or can start off somewhere like that, it helps us focus our symbolism and our knowledge of the planetary gods and how they are likely to be within the personality, how they're likely to be expressed. And so when we narrow in on these generalized associations, we narrow it in by putting a context of association around them and working through our interpretations from that place. Now, the next video I think that I'd like to concentrate on perhaps is I'm going to select someone, and then we can have a look at how these planetary placements express themselves within the personality of someone and how they're seen and how we encounter them. We can see them, if you like, the planetary elements as living forces within someone that are notable and sometimes much more than obvious.